The HR partner, David, held a folder with a single tab sticking out, labeled with a name. The man standing next to him, Aaron, was looking at the elevator call button, as if its response time was the most important variable in the universe. He wasn't fidgeting. He wasn't doing anything at all, just waiting for the doors to open so he could leave the company for good. He had just taken full and complete responsibility for the catastrophic failure of the Phoenix rollout, a project I had been leading for the past 6 months. It was my face on the presentations, my name on the status reports, and he had just told our manager and HR that the failure was his, effectively ending his career here to save mine. David offered a final, procedural statement about exit paperwork. Aaron gave a single nod. The elevator chimed its imminent arrival. I had a choice. I could let him go, accept the unbelievable gift he was giving me, and move on. Or I could walk over there and detonate the whole thing. I started walking. David's head turned, his expression shifting from procedural finality to active inquiry. Aaron didn't look at me, but I knew he was aware of my approach. I stopped a few feet away from them, my own folder of meeting notes held in my hand. "Aaron," I said, my voice coming out more determined than I expected. "Don't." He finally turned to look at me then. His expression was unreadable, but his attention was total. David looked back and forth between us, a man witnessing an event for which no corporate policy had been written. The elevator doors opened. Aaron didn't move. To understand why a man I once dismissed as the human equivalent of beige cubicle walls would willingly torpedo his own job for my sake, you have to understand the 18 months that led to that moment. It started, as these things often do, with a completely wrong first impression. I joined the company full of ambition. It was a step up for me, a bigger team, more complex projects, and a direct line to demonstrating my capabilities. On my first day, I was introduced to everyone on the project floor. It was a blur of names and handshakes, but some people stood out immediately. There was Mark, who led the client-facing initiatives. He was the kind of person everyone gravitated towards. He was always at the center of the important conversations, quick with a strategic insight or a project-saving idea. He was the first to welcome me, and he made sure I was included in the informal social group that seemed to drive the office's energy. And then there was Aaron. When my manager Hazel introduced us, he was at his desk updating a tracking spreadsheet. He stood up, gave a simple, "Welcome to the team," and then sat back down. He wasn't rude, he was just economical. Over the next few weeks, I built a mental file on him based on the observations of Mark and his circle. Aaron arrived at 8:59 a.m. every single day. He took his lunch at 12:30 p.m., always eating at his desk. He left at 5:01 p.m. His work was methodical, his documentation was exhaustive, and he never, ever joined the after-work drinks or the impromptu team lunches. Mark had a name for him: the metronome. It wasn't meant to be cruel, just descriptive. "You could set your watch by him," Mark would say. "Probably winds himself up at night." Everyone would laugh, and I did too. It seemed harmless. Aaron was just a background character in the dynamic, fast-paced world we were all trying to conquer. He was process, we were progress. He was the steady, boring baseline against which our own exciting careers would be measured. I filed him away as reliable, but not a player, and focused my attention on the people who seemed to matter. Mark took me under his wing. We started working together on high-visibility presentations, and he was a master at framing a narrative. He taught me how to highlight the wins and strategically de-emphasize the risks. Our work styles seemed to sync perfectly. We were both driven by getting things done and making sure leadership knew who did them. It wasn't long before our professional collaboration bled into our personal lives. We started dating. It felt like a perfect match, a power couple in the making. We talked about our 5-year plans, our ambitions, and the politics of the office. He was always giving me advice on how to position myself, which projects to fight for, and whose opinion mattered. My first real test came about 6 months in. We were handling a tricky client data integration, and the timelines were slipping. The technical team was hitting roadblocks, and the client was getting agitated. My focus, guided by Mark's advice, was on managing perceptions. I spent my days creating new slide decks, refining the project plan to show a path forward, and holding endless status meetings to reassure stakeholders. Meanwhile, a series of tedious but critical data mapping tasks were going unclaimed. They were the kind of thankless jobs that took hours of meticulous effort but generated zero visibility. In our team meetings, they'd be listed as open action items, and everyone would conveniently look away. I was too busy with the strategic work to deal with them. One afternoon, just an hour before a major checkpoint meeting with the client and our senior leadership, I discovered a catastrophic error in the data sample we were about to present. One of the core data sets was mismatched, which would have invalidated our entire progress report. It was a rookie mistake on my part. I had trusted a summary report without checking the source. A public failure like that would have been devastating for my reputation. Panic set in. There was no time to fix it. I was ready to go into the meeting and take the hit. As I was frantically trying to figure out how to even explain the failure, an email notification popped up. It was from Aaron. The subject was Phoenix Integration Data, revised sample for 2 p.m. meeting. I opened it. Attached was a new file. I checked the data. It was perfect. The mismatched set had been completely remapped and validated. It must have taken hours. I immediately went to his desk. Aaron, you're a lifesaver. When did you do this? He didn't look up from his screen. I saw the mismatch in the raw logs this morning. It was an easy fix. An easy fix? This must have taken you all day. Why didn't you say anything? He finally swiveled his chair slightly. It was an open task. It needed to be done. You were busy with the presentation. I'm going to tell Hazel you saved the project, I said. Don't, he said, his tone firm but not unkind. Just use the correct data. The goal is a successful project, not credit for individual tasks. He then turned back to his work, a clear signal that the conversation was over. I went into that meeting and presented the correct data. We got praised for our diligence. Mark clapped me on the shoulder afterward and said, "See? You pulled it out of the fire." I didn't correct him, but for the first time, I felt a pang of guilt. A few weeks later, I overheard one of the junior engineers talking about Erin. She was new and had been struggling with a particular system. I was so stuck, she said to a colleague, and Aaron just came over and walked me through the whole documentation. He stays late every second Tuesday to do it. He stays late? Someone else asked, surprised. I thought he left at 5:01 on the dot. He does, she replied, except for the second and fourth Tuesday of every month. He told me he has to leave on time all the other days for a family commitment. It was a small piece of information, but it landed with significant weight. His rigid schedule wasn't about a lack of commitment to his job. It was about a commitment to something else, something he kept entirely private. The metronome label suddenly felt less like a joke and more like an ignorant assumption. My relationship with Mark, meanwhile, was becoming a known quantity around the office. It amplified his voice and, by extension, mine. It also amplified the teasing. Mark's jokes about Aaron started to have a sharper edge. During a team meeting, while discussing resource allocation, Mark casually said, "Well, we can't give the complex part to Aaron. We need someone who can be agile. We know he's out the door when the clock strikes 5. Aaron was on the conference call line and said nothing, but I saw our manager Hazel make a small note on her pad. I felt a hot flush of embarrassment and shame. I was dating Mark. I should have said something, defended a colleague who I knew for a fact was pulling more than his weight. I should have pointed out that his boring documentation was the only reason half our projects didn't fall apart. But I stayed silent. I didn't want to create a conflict with Mark, and I told myself it was just office banter. The regret from that moment didn't fade. It settled in and stayed there. The real turning point, the one that irrevocably shifted my perspective, happened about a year into my job. My sister, who lived in another state, had a sudden medical emergency. She was going to be fine, but the out-of-pocket costs for her immediate care were substantial, and she wasn't in a position to cover them. I was stretched thin myself and was panicking about how to get her the funds she needed within the next 48 hours. I spent a whole day at work distracted, trying to figure out loan options and researching my own company's policies. We had an employee assistance fund for emergencies, but the application process looked bureaucratic and slow. I filled out the online form anyway, not expecting much. The next morning, I received an automated email. Your request for emergency assistance has been reviewed and approved. The funds will be dispersed within 24 hours. I was shocked. I had expected weeks of paperwork and questions. I went to our HR partner, David, to confirm it was real. Yes, it's all set, he said, looking at his system. The request was expedited. Expedited? How? I just submitted it yesterday afternoon. David looked a little uncomfortable, as if he was about to step over a confidentiality line. Normally, it takes a week, he explained, but a senior member of your department reached out to me directly last night. He made a case for the urgency and walked me through the precedent for an accelerated approval. He had all the policy numbers and previous cases ready, said he wanted to make sure a colleague in need was supported without delay. He asked to remain anonymous. My mind started racing. A senior member of my department. Mark? He knew about my sister's situation. I asked him about it that evening. Hey, did you happen to talk to HR about my assistance fund request? He looked confused. The what? Oh, right, for your sister. No, I didn't think of that. That's a great idea, though. Glad you got it sorted. It wasn't Mark. There was only one other person who it could have been, the kind of person who would know the policy numbers by heart. The kind of person who would do the work behind the scenes and insist on anonymity. I couldn't prove it, but I knew. It was Aaron. He must have overheard me on a stressed-out phone call, or simply noticed my distress. Instead of offering platitudes, he had gone and quietly, methodically solved the problem. After that, I started to see him differently. I wasn't just looking at him, I was watching him. I saw how he always took the time to answer questions from the junior staff, never making them feel like an interruption. I noticed that his famously detailed documentation wasn't just a personal quirk, it was an act of service to the rest of the team, allowing anyone to pick up his work if needed. When other teams dropped the ball, he would quietly coordinate with them to fix the issue, never pointing fingers in the public project chats. He wasn't avoiding the spotlight. He was actively directing it away from himself and onto the work itself. The man I had dismissed as boring was, in fact, the structural support holding up our entire team. He wasn't a metronome. He was the foundation. I knew I had to thank him. It felt dishonest not to. I caught him in the kitchen one afternoon as he was making tea. Aaron, I started, my nerve suddenly failing me. I wanted to say thank you. He turned, his expression neutral. For what? For everything. The data fix a while back, and other things, for just being a good colleague. He processed this for a moment. You're welcome, he said. The goal is for the team to succeed. It was a polite, professional wall. He was giving me no opening to press further, to acknowledge what I suspected he had done for my family. I lost my courage. We were still just colleagues, our interactions formal, though there was a warmth in them now that hadn't existed before. I had spent so much time laughing at him with Mark that I didn't know how to have a real conversation with him. This new understanding cast my relationship with Mark in a different light. I started noticing how often his strategic insights were just a repackaging of ideas from quieter team members. His talent wasn't in doing the work, but in presenting the work. He managed up, while Aaron managed the work itself. The disconnect between them and my place between them was becoming impossible to ignore. The final act began with the Phoenix rollout. It was the biggest project of the year, a complete overhaul of our primary, client-facing platform. I was the project lead, which meant my name was attached to its success or failure. Mark was leading the stakeholder communication, and Aaron was the lead technical architect. It was a triangle of competing priorities from the start. The project was massive and complex, and as we neared the launch date, we started falling behind schedule. The pressure from leadership was immense. During a tense planning meeting, Mark proposed a shortcut. It involved bypassing one of the final, lengthy data validation stages. It's a calculated risk, Mark argued, standing in front of the whiteboard. The initial validation stages were clean. This final pass is redundant 99% of the time. If we take this shortcut, we can hit our launch date. If we don't, we're looking at a 3-week slip and we'll lose the faith of our biggest client. He was persuasive. He made it sound like a bold, decisive move. Then Aaron spoke, his voice calm and even. It's not redundant. It's the stage that catches systemic mismatches that only appear when the full data load is integrated. The risk isn't 1%. Based on the complexity of the new schemas, I'd estimate the risk of a critical data corruption event is closer to 40%. 40%? Mark scoffed. Where are you getting that number? It feels like you're just trying to slow us down. It's based on an analysis of the integration points and the historical failure rates of similar migrations, Aaron said, completely unflustered. The data is in the risk log I published yesterday. Leadership was in the room. They heard Mark's promise of speed and Aaron's warning of risk. They chose speed. Hazel, our manager, gave the final directive. We'll accept the risk. Mark, keep the stakeholders happy. I want a full communication plan ready. Aaron, get the team ready to deploy. Me, you're on point for the launch. Make it happen. The 3 weeks leading up to the launch were a blur of activity. We pushed forward with the shortcut. On the day of the rollout, everything seemed fine at first. The system went live. We sent out the success emails. Mark and I celebrated with the team. Aaron had quietly left at 5:01 p.m. The next morning, the failure cascade began. It started with a single report of a customer's account showing incorrect data. Then another, then a dozen. By noon, it was clear that the 40% risk Aaron had calculated had materialized. The shortcut had caused a systemic data mismatch across thousands of accounts. The failure was public, catastrophic, and my name was all over it. We were in full-blown crisis mode for the next 48 hours. The post-mortem meeting was scheduled, and I knew I was going to be held accountable. I deserved to be. I was the project lead. I hadn't pushed back hard enough. I had let Mark's charisma override Aaron's data. The morning of the post-mortem, Hazel called me into her office. David from HR was there. We've had a development, Hazel said, her expression grim. Aaron came to us this morning. He's tendered his resignation. He told us that as the lead technical architect, he should have put a hard stop on the release. He said the directives were unclear and that he takes full responsibility for not blocking a launch he knew was high risk. I couldn't process it. But that's not true. The directive was clear. We all heard it. I made the final call to proceed. His version of events is that he failed to adequately communicate the risk, David said, and that as the senior technical voice, the ultimate accountability for a technical failure rests with him. He's insisted on it. He was shielding me. He was shielding Hazel. He was taking the entire multi-million-dollar failure onto his own shoulders, wrapping it up in a neat little package of personal accountability, and walking out the door with it. And that's when I left Hazel's office and walked towards the elevator, where Aaron was waiting for the finality of its doors closing. We were back in that moment, the open elevator waiting, David from HR standing by. Aaron, don't, I repeated. It's done, he said, his voice low. It's the cleanest path. Cleanest for who? Not for you, and not for the truth. The goal is the long-term health of the team, he said, reciting one of his principles as if it were a law of physics. A prolonged, blame-focused postmortem will demoralize everyone. This provides a clear resolution. The juniors are protected, management has a narrative, and you can lead the recovery effort without this hanging over your head. And what about you? I asked, my voice cracking slightly. What do you get out of it? He finally looked at me, and for the first time, I saw something beyond his professional reserve. It wasn't pity or anger. It was a profound sense of resolve. I get to act in accordance with my principles, he said, one of which is to keep good people from being harmed by bad processes. He paused. I'm not going to complicate your position by making this about anything else. You have a career here. You do good work. Don't let a single bad decision derail that. He was admitting it. He was admitting that he had feelings for me, but he was refusing to use them, refusing to let them be part of the equation. He was protecting me even from himself. The elevator doors began to close. I put my hand out to stop them. No, I said, looking at him, then at David. We're all going to the post-mortem meeting, and we're going to tell them what actually happened. An hour later, I stood at the front of the main conference room. All of senior leadership was there. Hazel, Mark. Aaron was sitting in the back, present at my insistence. I didn't point fingers. I didn't throw Mark under the bus. I simply laid out the chain of events, fact by fact. I put the project timeline on the screen. I showed the risk log Aaron had published, with its 40% failure probability highlighted. I showed the meeting minutes where the decision to accept that risk was made. I detailed my own role as project lead, admitting that I had failed to adequately champion the technical risk assessment over the pressure for a faster timeline. Then I turned to Aaron's contributions. I documented every project he had silently saved, every junior engineer he had mentored, every piece of thankless work he had done that had enabled the team's successes. I ended by talking about the rollout. The failure was not one of personnel, I concluded. It was a failure of process. We have a culture that rewards visibility over stability and speed over diligence. Aaron isn't the cause of this failure. He was the only one who tried to prevent it. His resignation, which I formally ask you to reject, would be the final and most costly error in this entire project. There was a long silence in the room. Then the division head spoke. Your resignation is not accepted, Aaron. And we are immediately commissioning a review of the project management and risk assessment framework. The aftermath was swift. My relationship with Mark ended that day. There was no big fight. It was a quiet conversation where it became clear that our fundamental values were irreconcilable. He saw Aaron's sacrifice as a strategic blunder. I saw it as an act of integrity. He left the company a few months later for a role somewhere else that probably better appreciated his talent for narrative. I made a point to publicly acknowledge Aaron's role in our team's successes. The metronome jokes stopped. People started going to him for advice, not just on technical problems, but on process and strategy. They finally saw him as I now did. A week after the postmortem, Aaron asked if I wanted to get coffee. We didn't talk about the rollout. We talked about his family commitment, caring for his elderly father on a strict schedule. We talked about my sister. We talked about what we valued in work and in life. It wasn't a date filled with sparks. It was a conversation filled with alignment. We started talking every day. We were slow, deliberate. We built a friendship first, based on the truth of who we both were. We started collaborating at work, not as rivals, but as partners. We co-authored the new risk assessment policy that the company adopted. We were recognized for it, together. It felt right. A few months into our slow, careful courtship, I told my sister the full story of who had expedited her assistance fund request. She insisted on sending him a thank you card. When he received it, he just sent me a one-line message. It was the right thing to do. It's been over a year since the day at the elevator. We are together now. Our life isn't a dramatic movie. It's steady, it's reliable, it's built on a foundation of showing up, doing the right thing, and protecting each other. What I once would have called boring, I now understand is the most profound and exciting love I have ever known. It's the love of a person who will quietly fix the broken thing instead of just talking about it. The person who will build a safety net for you and never ask for thanks. He was never boring. He was just a grown-up, waiting patiently while I learned to be one too. I came so close to overlooking the one person who was already acting like a partner long before we ever held hands.